Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Fronteras, a Changing America. I'm your host, Anthony Moreno. Since President Trump ordered an end to the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, or DACA, the future of hundreds of thousands of people in the U.S. has been left in limbo. Today, we speak with an attorney who found out as a teenager that she was undocumented. Our guest applied and was admitted to the DACA program, giving her protected status while on her path to becoming an attorney here in New Mexico. Today, she has a green card and shares her perspective with us as an immigrant in the United States. Please welcome Jazmin Irazoqui-Ruiz. Jazmin, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony, for having me.
Okay, now I want to start off and talk a little bit about your life. Now, I've met and interviewed many folks who were in the DACA program or currently in the DACA program, and they have shared with me that they've known their entire life that they did not have legal status. However, your story is a little bit different. You found out as a teenager that you didn't have legal status. What was that like?
You know, I think it's funny that you mentioned that you haven't talked to a lot of individuals in this situation, because across the immigrant rights movement, we've seen that this is a pretty common story, particularly from states that are very conservative. And so I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, particularly in Maricopa County at the time when Joe Arpaio was the sheriff there. And so it was very anti-immigrant. There was a lot of racial profiling and there was a lot of xenophobia. So I think there was credible fear on my mother's part to hide the fact that we were undocumented. And so finding out at the age of 16 makes sense, because that's when teenagers want to get driver's licenses, when you start thinking about college. And it was at the time when my mom told us, but additionally, because she suffered from a stroke and my twin sister and I thought, time for us to start contributing to the household. Mom can't do it all on her own anymore.
As a 16-year-old and all of that happening and then wanting to take a stronger role in your household, how did you make that work?
So it was really difficult, right? Because I feel like a lot of the foundation kind of came crumbling down, in the sense that, okay, not only do I have to deal with this new identity, but now we have to figure out how that impacts our ability to be able to help economically sustain our family. And so this happened in April of 2008 when my mom told us. And not too long after that summer, we were living in New Mexico, where, you know, my mom putting her Google skills to use, she found out that in New Mexico we would have better opportunities to obtain driver's licenses, to go on to college, and be able to get the life that she dreamed of us having when she came to the U.S.
So what were some of the things as a 16-year-old and learning about this, what were some of the things in your life that instantly changed?
Well, I instantly knew that in Arizona, I was not going to be able to get a driver's license. We talked to an attorney, and the attorney said that we would be lucky, and I say we, me and my twin sister, who is also documented, would be able to go to a community college. According to him, to the U.S. government, we didn't exist. We were nowhere in the system, and so the likelihood of us pursuing higher education and any kind of professional occupation would be out of the question, which is something that my sister and I have always wanted to pursue.
So how did you make do during that time without legal status?
Well, that was really difficult. So immediately after my mom disclosed this to us, we started looking at what steps we needed to take in order to move to New Mexico, which was a more friendly state towards immigrants. And I mean, it took a trip coming down here, figuring out where we were going to live, how we were going to be able to pay the bills while we were here. So for some time, my mom would go back and forth between Arizona and New Mexico to be able to keep working while she found a place to work here.
So what was that like, trying to find a place to live, trying to find some sort of job that may pay you or anything like that, any way to make money really. How was that possible if you didn't have legal status? How did you make do?
There are many ways that communities are creative when it comes to being able to be sustainable. And one of the ways that my family did it was through being small business owners and being able to contract with other businesses in order to pay the bills. And so I think that's something that more people are becoming aware of, and it's a larger issue that is being talked about in economic development endeavors, which is actually the area of law that I practice currently.
I definitely want to talk with you more about that and what you're doing now in regards to the work that you're doing as a staff attorney with the New Mexico Immigrant Law Center. But let's move forward a little bit in your life. So you learned as a teenager that you didn't have legal status. Then DACA becomes available. What were some of your thoughts when you found out about this program? Did you have any concerns about sharing your information with the government or applying for it?
Yeah, so DACA became available in 2012, the summer of 2012, and at the time I believe I was a sophomore in college. And there was a lot of hesitation, right? We knew that there was a large movement across the country to try to create some type of larger systemic change. At the time, it was the DREAM Act, and there have been multiple iterations of it and a lot of organizing efforts that led the Obama administration to pass this executive order. But there was a lot of hesitation, and I actually didn't end up getting DACA until 2016. And some of it was hesitation, right? I come from a mixed immigration status family where we have U.S. citizens, legal permanent residents, and documented individuals, people who have humanitarian visas pending. And so that was definitely something that made me hesitant, because in applying for this benefit, USCIS and immigration would now have my home address where you have the mixed immigration status family living. And so that puts some of my family members in danger. But aside from that hesitation, there was also the cost barrier, right? As I mentioned, I'm an identical twin, and how do you decide which twin gets to apply when the application is roughly $500? And when you talk about two of us, that's $1,000 there. Then for a low-income immigrant family is a substantial barrier.
So you're an identical twin, you mentioned. You had to make a tough choice on who was going to apply for DACA, is that correct?
No, we actually didn't. So the choice was, we're not going to apply until we have money for both of us to apply. And
Okay.
so then, right, 2012 went by, 2013, 14, 15, and finally in 2016 is when we applied and were able to obtain DACA. So we're talking about 4 years, and people say, why don't you just apply for citizenship? Well, first of all, it doesn't work that way. There aren't avenues to citizenship just because you decide to pay or apply for it. But then the avenues that are available to get any kind of protected status is difficult, and it's burdensome in terms of having to pay for it.
So you didn't really get DACA or admitted to the program until you were in law school, is that correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
So what was it like going through your undergraduate years without DACA? How did you make do?
That was really difficult, but luckily in New Mexico, there was a law that was passed, Senate Bill 582, now codified in statute, that allowed individuals, regardless of immigration status, to pursue higher education. And within that bill, there were provisions that if you met certain conditions, you would be eligible for in-state tuition and the lottery scholarship, which, lucky for us, we moved here in time to be able to meet those conditions and have access to the lottery scholarship, which covered a lot of tuition, not all of it, but enough so that we could continue to contract to be able to pay for the difference, and then also help at home with the bills.
So without that state law, do you think you would have been able to go to college in your undergraduate years?
I have met friends who have done it. Would I have done it? I'm not sure if I would have had the resources or the information to be in the same position that my friends are at. Right? A lot of them got 2, 3, 4 associate's degrees before they decided to move to New Mexico and pursue a bachelor's degree here and then go on to professional school.
So you graduate undergraduate years at University of New Mexico. I believe you have a business degree, is that correct?
That's correct.
So what were some of your thoughts on going to law school? I mean, you have this opportunity and you wanted to pursue it, but you also have a concern about maybe not being able to even practice law if once you finish law school. So can you kind of explain to me what that process was like and what were some of your thoughts before even applying to law school?
Yeah, so it's funny you should say that because it's a little more complicated than that, right? I was in undergrad originally, like my twin sister, pursuing medical school, realizing that there were various restrictions to certain programs, and then I decided to pursue business instead. And while I was in business school, we're talking about way back in 2013, 2014, right? When DACA was so new that you didn't have individuals in these positions now applying to professional school. So I think the first barrier was figuring out whether or not this institution would allow me admission to the program. And so that was the first step, right? Will law school even accept me? Will they deny my application because of my immigration status? Should I be open about it? Should I disclose it? Should that be the center of my statement of purpose? And at the time, I didn't know it, but there were already 2 law students who were admitted in the same year at the UNM School of Law. But again, this was such a new issue that people didn't know about it. And so once I get to the law school, I make contact with one of these individuals who told me licensing is going to be an issue. And I'm telling you because I've been trying to figure out what's going to happen with regard to that. And so sure enough, I managed to graduate law school. And then as I'm applying for application to take the bar exam, I start realizing this is going to be difficult. I'm told that even if I pass the bar exam, I may not be able to get admitted to the profession, which happened. And luckily, thanks to a group of attorneys who are helping me in the New Mexico Dream Team as part of the advocacy organization that I've been involved in for years now, we're able to create enough organizing efforts to admit me to the bar in December of 2017.
Wow, that sounds like quite the journey there. I want to get back to the program, though. How did it really change your life?
So DACA, so when I originally got DACA, almost immediately it opened a door of opportunities in terms of being able to learn what does it mean to practice law, right? Up until then, I had been very fortunate that nonprofit organizations would offer me internships in turn for being able to pay for tuition, which was great because I worked to pay for tuition, right? One of the other things that isn't talked about is that professional school isn't covered by the lottery scholarship. And we're talking about a tuition of $15,000 a year. And how do you pay for that, right? When we're in competitive programs, where working is often out of the question, although we do it, right? And so it offered me the opportunity to start working at the city attorney's office, which was a huge wage increase. And I used that job to be able to pay for law school, but it also opened the door to job opportunities that I didn't have before, right? Like the government sector. Oftentimes individuals in our positions stay away from these types of institutions because they generally are seen as someone who's not going to be receptive to our situation.
So in recent years, we've seen obviously a dramatic change to DACA. I'd kind of like to hear your thoughts when you found out that the president decided to end the program.
Yeah, that was a really difficult time, but I knew that it wasn't going to be the end all be all. And the reason I say that is because our community has been resourceful in being here before DACA was implemented. But personally, I knew that it was going to be a big issue for me because even though DACA allowed me protection, gave me employment authorization for 2 years and a social security number, I knew that it wasn't enough to get admitted to the bar. And when the Trump administration decided to rescind DACA on September 5th of 2017, it hit me really hard because that was my first day as an attorney, as my fellowship. And I was worried that that would affect the fact that the New Mexico Board of Bar Examiners and the Supreme Court would deny my bar admission application, which they did. And it was exactly for that reason. They knew that DACA wasn't a permanent program, and they knew that employment authorization was not of, for lack of better terms, unlimited duration under that program.
Wow. So do you still have any concerns, for those who are in DACA right now and perhaps going through college like you were, or in their final years of getting a degree or starting to work? Can you kind of share with us, from your perspective, what's at stake?
Yeah, I think for me, it hits really close to home because my identical twin sister is in her last year of medical school, and she's currently applying for general surgery residency programs across the country. And her goal is to stay and treat patients in New Mexico, right, in our language, be able to provide that cultural competency. But we know that because of the program that she's in, employment authorization will be vital. And so if employment authorization isn't something that can be renewable, then you're not employable. And if you're not employable, then you cannot practice in your area, right? That's a different facet of, can I even obtain my licensure? So it's a huge issue, right? We're talking about an economic issue. We're talking about the continuation of education, and then we're also talking about entering the workforce.
Now, you have your green card right now. You mentioned your identical twin sister is in the program.
Mm-hmm.
Are you concerned that, what happens if the Supreme Court decides that this program, that the Trump administration was legal in doing what they did by ending the program? What are your concerns in regards, and perhaps Congress doesn't take it up? How can this impact your family?
I mean, I think we're talking about more than just my family, right? It impacts anyone who has DACA and is in these types of programs. And they're across all programs, right? It's not just law school, medical school, dental hygiene. We're talking about different types of professional and occupational licensing that's at stake here. And so for my family particularly, right, my sister has been in school 4 years for her bachelor's degree, 4 years for medical school, and she still has a good 7 years to go for her surgery residency program. And so she may not be able to practice if DACA goes away at this point, unless there's another avenue for her to adjust her status, which in reality, the immigration system is so cumbersome that there are not avenues for some individuals to be able to obtain a green card and be on the pathway for citizenship.
Okay, now I want to talk about the work that you're doing right now with the New Mexico Immigrant Law Center. Now, you work with immigrant families in economic development and also work in policy advocacy for children and community education, and in different projects. Can you kind of share with me how every day you see what is at stake?
Yeah, so I think it's funny because most of our clients come to us trying to seek immigration relief, right? There's this narrative of, why don't people just get legal? People are trying to do that every day. What I'm saying is the system, it's not that easy. So what I proposed with my postgraduate fellowship was to bring an economic development component where I practice the intersection of business, tax, and consumer protection law and the effect that immigration law has on that. And if you don't have access to immigration relief, how you can be economically sustainable within the current system as it currently exists, which is what we're doing, right? And so I have clients who come to me and it turns out that they want to start a business and they want to figure out how to do that, right, so that they can pay their taxes and be sustainable. And sometimes it turns out that this particular individual has never spoken to an immigration attorney and they're eligible for relief. And so those are the happy stories, right? I've had some clients who come to me, help some kind of issue that they have with the IRS or the New Mexico Taxation and Revenue Department, and then it turns out that we can get them a green card. And so then that is not only economic sustainability for them, but also protection from deportation. But it's every day, right? You have even individuals who are trying to become citizens who have green cards that need help with tax issues as well, because all these areas of law are generally practiced in a vacuum. But you cannot talk about immigration law without talking about the implications of tax law or the implications of consumer protections, because these are largely vulnerable communities in states like ours.
So what do you think state lawmakers can do in New Mexico to ensure that people who may not have legal status, or people who want to start a business who are immigrants, can really pursue the American dream and make a difference to the economy here in our state?
I think there are a lot of things that can be done. One of the things that we're doing right now as a coalition that the New Mexico Immigrant Law Center and the New Mexico Dream Team sit on is trying to pass a professional and occupational licensing bill to remove immigration status as a barrier in order to be able to practice the area, whether it was professional education or we're talking about occupational licenses as well that require specific licenses, right? New Mexico is it's the ninth most difficult state to obtain professional and occupational licensing. And that's one part, right? And then the other part is commercial licensing. There is this federal law, 8 U.S.C. 1621, that essentially says undocumented immigrants cannot have access to a public benefit. Public benefit has been interpreted to mean licensing, unless a state passes a law saying otherwise. And so that's exactly what we're asking the legislature to do. We need to pass this law, and it's not only access to that professional licensing, it's an economic and educational issue.
Okay, now I want to also talk about the work you are doing with the New Mexico Dream Team. Now, many folks who are in DACA, hope to pursue DACA, or just dreamers in general who have been looking for a path to citizenship for nearly 20 years in not only our state but our country. Tell us about the work that you're doing with them and the advocacy work that you're doing as well.
Yeah, so I really love talking about the Dream Team because I'm one of the founding members, and there's a large focus in education justice and making sure first educating the educational institutions on Senate Bill 585, right? Senate Bill 582, which passed back in 2005. There are still institutions to this day that deny in-state tuition or access to state funding for school because there isn't an awareness about this law. And then the other thing is, how do you work with students who aren't legal permanent residents or aren't U.S. citizens? Because it's not just talking about undocumented students, you're talking about students who have other types of visas that these particular individuals aren't used to working with. And so it's a large educational component, but it's also organizing. We organize the youth to know their rights, to know what the law says, that they have access to an education, but also so that within themselves there's a social consciousness for them to be engaged in the work that's happening across the state.
Now, you found out that you didn't have legal status when you were 16 years old. What were some things that you would tell somebody who today is in that same position?
I would tell them not to get discouraged. Our communities have been here for so long, right? This whole legal status or borders is a social construct that we can push back on, right? They can still continue to go to college. Do not for a second think that you can't if that's what you want to do. If you want to open a business and not pursue college, that's something that we can do as well. But I think it's vital to get in contact with individuals who have had that lived experience so that you have access to resources to help you think through what does it mean and how can I make sure that I'm successful regardless.
What would you say to policymakers who are in office right now, who are in Congress right now, who could actually make a difference on this issue and bring this up for discussion? What would you say to them?
I would say that this is something that would benefit New Mexico, right? Immigrants are a large part of our state. They contribute largely to the economy, but they're also individuals who are really hardworking, and our representatives know this. Our representatives work with us all the time. as much as people may not realize it, we're up at the roundhouse talking to people and educating them on a lot of issues when the legislative session comes around. And so they know our faces, they know we're there, and I just ask that they support us in these efforts that are beneficial to New Mexico.
Okay, so what about lawmakers who may be outside of New Mexico in Congress, who may not be familiar with the issues that many in New Mexico face? What would you say to them?
I would say to them, if we're talking specifically about DACA, is that this is something that should become statute. As an executive order, that is a danger that the Obama administration knew could happen, that another administration could come and take it away. And so if there's anything that Congress can do right now is to make sure that you go back to the drawing table and consider a more permanent policy that allows other individuals to have a pathway to citizenship.
Jazmin Irazoqui-Ruiz is a staff attorney for the New Mexico Immigrant Law Center. Jazmin, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story on Fronteras, Changing America.
Thank you, Anthony.
And we want to thank you for joining us on the program. Don't forget, you can always send us your thoughts and story ideas to feedback@nmsu.edu. We're on social media as well. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and also subscribe to the KRWG News YouTube channel. Have a great evening.